There are people who do not announce themselves. They do not compete for attention, validation, or approval. They often walk alone, speak little, and observe much. To the world, they may appear withdrawn, broken, or insignificant. But beneath that quiet surface lives something most people misunderstand. Wounded loners have been forced inward by pain, rejection, or loss, and in that inward movement they encounter themselves. While others distract themselves with noise and company, these individuals learn to sit with discomfort, silence, and truth. This is where their so-called danger lies, not in aggression, but in clarity. Because once someone has faced their own wounds without escaping, they can no longer be easily controlled by fear, opinion, or expectation. Pain turns them inward instead of outward. Pain has a way of stripping life down to its essentials. For many people, pain becomes something to escape, suppress, or project outward onto others. But for wounded loners, pain forces a different movement. When external support collapses and familiar identities fall apart, the usual distractions lose their power. In this absence, attention naturally turns inward. This inward turn is not chosen, it is demanded by circumstance, yet within it lies transformation. Pain draws awareness out of the mind's constant storytelling and into direct experience. Instead of running from discomfort, the wounded loner begins to sit with it. In doing so, something unexpected is discovered. Pain exists within awareness, but awareness is larger than pain. This realization changes the relationship to suffering. Pain is no longer an enemy to fight, but a teacher revealing depth. What once felt unbearable becomes workable. The inward path begins here, not as philosophy, but as lived presence. Turning inward reveals how limited thinking is when faced with real pain. The mind searches for explanations, blame, or meaning, but none of these dissolve the raw experience. Eventually, thinking exhausts itself. What remains is sensation, emotion, and awareness. By staying present with what is felt instead of escaping into narrative, resistance softens. Pain no longer spreads into psychological suffering, it remains intense but clean. This distinction is crucial. Psychological suffering survives through avoidance and interpretation. When attention stays with the body and breath, pain moves instead of stagnates. The wounded loner learns this through necessity. Over time, fear diminishes. Pain is no longer terrifying when it is faced directly. This builds inner stability. The loner discovers they can remain present even in discomfort. That discovery becomes strength. Most people move outward when pain arises. They seek validation, distraction, or control. This outward movement reinforces dependence on circumstances. Wounded loners, often having lost these external anchors, are forced to turn inward. This inward attention is not self-absorption, it is awareness returning to its source. Energy that once fueled reaction now fuels perception. The loner becomes deeply familiar with their inner landscape. Emotions are felt without judgment. Thoughts are seen without being believed. This honesty removes illusion. Pain no longer defines identity, it becomes an experience passing through awareness. This shift breaks the cycle of victimhood. The loner is no longer defined by what happened, but by how consciously it was met. From this arises clarity. Facing pain inwardly dissolves false identities. The stories of being broken, abandoned, or unworthy lose their grip when observed closely. These identities depend on unconscious belief. Sustained awareness exposes their impermanence. The wounded loner watches emotions rise and fall, thoughts appear and dissolve. Through this observation, identity loosens. Awareness remains steady while experiences change. This stability brings calm. The loner no longer needs to defend an image shaped by pain. They are rooted in presence, not story. This is why many wounded loners appear composed after deep suffering. They are no longer centered in the narrative of pain, but in the awareness that survived it. Turning inward also sharpens perception of unconscious behavior. The wounded loner sees how people avoid themselves through noise, ambition, conflict, and attachment. This insight is lived, not theoretical. Having been stripped of escape, the loner understands avoidance deeply. This understanding does not lead to arrogance. It brings quiet detachment and compassion. They no longer try to convince or correct others. They see patterns clearly and choose distance when needed. Pain has refined discernment. What appears as withdrawal is often clarity. They no longer participate in unnecessary drama. Presence has become more valuable than validation. As inward attention deepens, reactivity diminishes. Pain no longer immediately triggers anger or blame. Awareness creates space between feeling and action. In this space, choice appears. The wounded loner may still feel hurt, but they do not act from it unconsciously. This restraint is not suppression, it is understanding. Acting out pain only multiplies suffering. By remaining present, pain completes its cycle naturally. This is emotional maturity born not from teaching but from experience. The loner becomes steady, their presence feels grounded. They are no longer pulled by every emotional wave. Inward-facing pain dissolves dependency. When comfort cannot be sourced externally, reliance shifts inward. The loner learns to be with themselves fully, without constant reassurance. This builds quiet self-sufficiency, not the egoic claim of needing no one, but the grounded knowing that presence is enough. From this place, relationships become choices rather than needs. The wounded loner is no longer driven by fear of abandonment or loneliness. Pain has taught them how to remain whole in solitude. Pain also reconnects the loner to the body. By staying with sensation instead of story, awareness anchors in the present. The body becomes a gateway to now. This embodiment dissolves mental suffering. The loner becomes grounded, less lost in thought. This grounding strengthens resilience. They are harder to destabilize because they live in direct experience rather than mental projection. Presence becomes their home. Over time, pain loses its power to shape identity. It becomes an experience rather than a definition. The wounded loner no longer introduces themselves through what hurt them. They have lived through pain consciously. This frees enormous energy. The past loosens its grip. Life becomes immediate again. Presence replaces memory as the primary reference point. Turning inward also removes the need for explanation. The loner does not feel compelled to justify their pain or choices. Understanding has become internal. This silence unsettles those who rely on external validation. But the loner is no longer seeking agreement. Alignment with truth has replaced the need for approval. This inward path builds inner authority. Having already faced collapse, the loner is not easily threatened by loss. Fear loses its leverage. They know they can survive without appearances or roles. This quiet confidence is often misunderstood. It is not dominance, it is freedom from fear-based control. This is why wounded loners are often misread. Their strength was not built through ambition or confidence, but through silent confrontation with pain. They did not escape it, they entered it with awareness. And in doing so, they discovered a depth that remains unshaken by noise, opinion, or expectation. Solitude sharpens awareness. Solitude removes the constant feedback loop that keeps the mind busy defending an image of itself. When you are alone, there is no audience to perform for, no immediate reflection of who you think you are. This absence is uncomfortable for the ego, but it is liberating for awareness. In solitude, attention naturally withdraws from external roles and returns inward. You begin to notice thoughts more clearly because they are no longer reinforced by conversation or reaction. The mind's patterns become visible. You see how often it repeats itself, how it seeks distraction, how it resists stillness. This clarity does not arise in noise, it arises in quiet. Solitude creates the conditions in which awareness sharpens, not through effort, but through lack of interference. When nothing demands your attention, attention returns to itself. This is not isolation. It is the reclaiming of perception from habit. In solitude, perception slows down. Without constant stimulation, the senses awaken, sounds become sharper, sensations in the body become more noticeable. The present moment reveals itself with greater detail. This heightened awareness is not mystical, it is natural. It was always available, but it was drowned out by distraction. Solitude allows you to experience life directly instead of through commentary. You begin to notice the space between thoughts, the pauses between breaths. These spaces were always there, but solitude makes them visible. Awareness sharpens not because something is added, but because noise is removed. You are no longer filtering experience through opinion or expectation. You are simply here. This simplicity brings depth. What once seemed ordinary becomes alive. When alone, unconscious patterns surface. Without distraction, the mind reveals what it has been avoiding. Restlessness, sadness, boredom, or fear may arise. Most people escape at this point. But when solitude is embraced consciously, these experiences become teachers. You observe how the mind reacts to emptiness. You see its urge to fill silence. This observation strengthens awareness. You are no longer identified with the urge. You watch it. In watching, it weakens. Solitude trains awareness by exposing the mind's habits without judgment. This is how clarity develops. You are no longer controlled by what arises internally. You are present with it. This presence sharpens perception and dissolves unconscious behavior. Solitude also removes social conditioning. Much of human behavior is shaped by expectation, comparison, and approval. When you step away from constant interaction, these influences lose strength. You begin to sense what is authentic rather than what is expected. Awareness sharpens because it is no longer distorted by social pressure. You feel your own rhythm. You hear your own inner signals. This does not make you antisocial. It makes you real. You return to interaction from clarity instead of need. Solitude restores inner alignment. In quiet aloneness, the body becomes a primary anchor. Without external focus, attention settles into sensation. You feel tension, relaxation, subtle movement. This embodiment sharpens awareness because the body lives only in now. Thoughts may drift, but sensation keeps you present. Over time, this creates grounded clarity. You are less lost in thinking. Awareness becomes stable. Solitude trains you to live from the body rather than the mind's abstractions. Solitude also sharpens discernment. When you are not constantly influenced by others' opinions, you see situations more clearly. You sense when something is false, draining, or misaligned. This clarity is quiet. It does not announce itself, but it guides choices. You become selective, not out of fear, but out of awareness. Solitude teaches you what deserves your energy. As awareness sharpens, reactivity decreases. Without constant interaction, emotional triggers lose momentum. You notice emotions without immediately acting on them. This creates inner space. In that space, wisdom emerges. You are no longer compelled to react. You respond consciously. Solitude strengthens this capacity. It builds inner stability. Solitude also reveals the difference between loneliness and aloneness. Loneliness is the mind's resistance to being with itself. Aloneness is presence enjoying its own depth. As awareness sharpens, loneliness dissolves. You discover that being alone is not absence, but fullness without distraction. This realization changes your relationship with yourself. You stop seeking constant stimulation. You become comfortable in stillness. With time, solitude becomes nourishing. Awareness grows effortlessly. You do not need to analyze yourself. You simply observe. This observation refines perception. You begin to see subtle motivations, unconscious desires, hidden fears, not with judgment, but with clarity. Solitude becomes a mirror that shows truth gently. Solitude also reveals impermanence. Without distraction, you see thoughts arise and fade, emotions move and dissolve. This teaches non-attachment. Awareness sharpens because you stop clinging. You witness life flowing through you. This creates ease. Nothing needs to be held. As awareness matures in solitude, you carry it back into the world. Interaction no longer overwhelms you. Noise does not disturb you as easily. You remain centered. Solitude has trained your perception. You can be with others without losing yourself. Awareness stays sharp because it has been strengthened in quiet. This is why solitude sharpens awareness. It removes distortion. It exposes truth. It returns attention to its source, not as escape, but as grounding. In solitude, awareness remembers itself. And from that remembering, clarity becomes natural, steady, and unshakable. They are no longer easily manipulated. When someone has faced their inner pain consciously, manipulation loses much of its power over them. Manipulation works by triggering unconscious fear, desire, guilt, or the need for approval. But when these inner hooks have been seen and felt directly, they no longer operate in the same way. The wounded loner has already encountered fear within themselves without running from it. They have already felt emptiness without immediately filling it. Because of this, external pressure finds little to attach to. Awareness stands between stimulus and reaction. Where manipulation once entered automatically, there is now space. In that space, clarity arises. The person is no longer pulled into agreement, compliance, or resistance without seeing what is happening. This does not make them rigid or defensive, it makes them present. Manipulation requires unconsciousness. Presence dissolves it. Manipulation often relies on emotional urgency. It creates the feeling that something must be done now. that a response is required immediately. The wounded loner no longer responds to urgency automatically. Having lived through inner collapse, they are not frightened by pauses. Silence does not threaten them. They are comfortable waiting, observing, and feeling. This stillness interrupts manipulation. Without emotional haste, pressure weakens. The loner senses when urgency is manufactured rather than real. They do not need to explain or justify their refusal to react. They simply remain present. This calm unsettles those who rely on emotional leverage. The absence of reaction becomes strength. Another common tool of manipulation is fear of loss of connection, status, identity, or security. But those who have already lost much internally are no longer easily controlled by this fear. The wounded loner has experienced inner collapse and survived it consciously. They know that loss does not destroy awareness. This knowing removes fear at its root. When someone threatens withdrawal, rejection, or disapproval, it no longer carries the same weight. The loner does not cling. They remain grounded. Manipulation fails when fear fails. Presence replaces dependency. Manipulation also depends on the need to be seen in a certain way. The ego wants approval, recognition, and belonging. Solitude and inward-facing pain dissolve much of this need. The wounded loner no longer defines themselves through external reflection. They know who they are beyond roles and labels. Because of this, flattery and criticism lose power. Praise does not inflate them. Blame does not collapse them. They listen without being hooked. This emotional neutrality is often mistaken for indifference, but it is actually inner freedom. Guilt is another common lever. It works by activating unconscious self-judgment, but when awareness has illuminated inner patterns, guilt loses its grip. The wounded loner feels responsibility where appropriate, but they no longer carry unconscious guilt imposed from outside. They sense when guilt is being used to control rather than to clarify. Awareness distinguishes truth from manipulation. The loner does not argue. They simply do not internalize what is false. This quiet refusal is powerful. Because they are present, wounded loners sense incongruence. Words, tone, and intention are felt together. When something is misaligned, they notice immediately. This intuitive clarity is not mystical. It arises from deep listening. Manipulation often hides behind words. Presence sees beneath them. The loner may not confront directly, but they adjust their distance. They withdraw energy. Manipulation cannot function without engagement. Their lack of reactivity also plays a role. Manipulation thrives on emotional reaction. Anger, defensiveness, urgency. The wounded loner has learned to feel without acting compulsively. Emotions arise, but they are held in awareness. Without reaction, manipulation has no momentum. Pressure dissipates. The interaction changes. What once worked no longer does. They are also less attached to outcomes. Manipulation often promises reward or threatens consequence. The loner is not driven by imagined futures. They live more fully in now. This presence reduces susceptibility to promises and threats. They are guided by alignment rather than gain. This makes them unpredictable to those who rely on incentives. Because they have integrated pain, wounded loners trust themselves deeply. They do not seek external authority to tell them who they are or what to do. This inner authority cannot be overridden. Advice may be heard, but it is filtered through awareness. Manipulation fails where self-trust is strong. They also value truth over comfort. Manipulation often offers comfort at the cost of authenticity. The wounded loner has already faced discomfort consciously. They are not tempted by false ease. They choose clarity even when it is inconvenient. This choice protects them naturally. Over time, people sense this. Attempts to manipulate become rare. Not because the loner resists aggressively, but because presence makes manipulation ineffective. There is nothing to pull, nothing to push against. Awareness stands quietly, unmovable. This is why wounded loners are no longer easily manipulated. They have reclaimed their inner center. They are not hardened, but clear, not defensive, but awake. And in a world built on unconscious reaction, this quiet awareness becomes undeniable strength. They see through social illusions. When awareness deepens through solitude and conscious pain, social illusions become easier to see. Much of society operates on unexamined assumptions, ideas about success, worth, identity, and belonging that are rarely questioned. These ideas are absorbed unconsciously and reinforced through repetition. But when someone has spent time alone with themselves, without constant reinforcement from others, these assumptions lose their authority. The wounded loner begins to see that many social roles are performances rather than truths. People act not from presence, but from fear of exclusion or desire for validation. This realization does not create judgment, it creates clarity. Awareness sees the patterns without becoming entangled in them. What once seemed solid now appears fragile and constructed. The illusion is not that society exists, but that its values define reality. When this illusion dissolves, perception becomes clearer and less reactive. Social illusions thrive on comparison. Status, appearance, achievement, and opinion are used to measure worth. The wounded loner, having faced inner collapse, no longer believes in these measurements. They have seen that identity based on comparison is unstable and exhausting. When comparison falls away, perception sharpens. You begin to see people not as competitors or threats, but as individuals acting from conditioning. This does not make you superior, it makes you detached. Detachment here does not mean indifference, it means freedom from the need to position yourself within artificial hierarchies. Awareness stands outside the game and sees it clearly. Another powerful illusion is the belief that constant activity equals meaning. Society glorifies busyness, noise, and productivity as signs of worth. But solitude reveals that much of this activity is avoidance. The wounded loner recognizes that many people remain busy to escape stillness because stillness threatens the ego. Seeing this clearly dissolves the illusion of urgency. Not everything requires reaction. Not everything matters as much as it appears. This clarity creates calm. You no longer rush to keep up appearances. You act when action is aligned, not when pressure demands it. Social identity is another illusion that becomes transparent. Labels such as profession, status, ideology, or group affiliation are often mistaken for the self. The wounded loner has seen these identities dissolve under pain. When the outer structures collapse, something deeper remains. This experience reveals that identity is not fixed. Awareness exists before and beyond labels. Once this is seen, social roles are no longer taken personally. You can participate without being defined. This freedom is deeply unsettling to systems built on conformity. Language itself becomes transparent. Words are seen as symbols rather than truth. The wounded loner senses when language is used to obscure rather than reveal. Social narratives often hide fear beneath confident statements. Presence feels this immediately. You hear not only what is said, but what is avoided. This sensitivity allows you to see through persuasion, slogans, and collective opinions without hostility. You simply do not absorb what is not true for you. Group behavior is also seen more clearly. Many actions are driven by unconscious imitation rather than genuine insight. People repeat beliefs to feel safe, not because they have examined them. The wounded loner notices this and steps back. They do not rush to agree or disagree, they remain present. This neutrality allows truth to emerge without force. Social pressure weakens when awareness does not react. Social fear becomes visible as well. Fear of being judged, excluded, or misunderstood drives much behavior. Having already faced inner fear, the wounded loner is no longer governed by it. This allows them to act authentically even when it goes against expectation. They are not rebellious, they are aligned. Awareness sees fear and does not obey it. Success and failure also lose their exaggerated meaning. Society defines success narrowly and punishes deviation. The wounded loner sees that success measured externally often hides inner emptiness. Failure, on the other hand, often opens depth. This inversion dissolves illusion. You no longer chase symbols of worth, you value presence instead. Social conflict becomes less compelling. Much conflict arises from identity defending itself. When identity loosens, conflict loses fuel. The wounded loner sees arguments as collisions of unconsciousness rather than battles to win. This understanding brings peace. You do not need to correct everyone. Awareness allows space. The illusion of certainty also dissolves. Society rewards confident opinions even when they are shallow. The wounded loner sees the fragility behind certainty. They value not knowing over false confidence. This humility sharpens perception. You listen more deeply, you speak less, but with clarity. Time-based pressure is another illusion. Society pushes constant forward movement. The wounded loner sees that life happens now. Future promises lose power. This presence undermines manipulation and fear. Awareness remains grounded. Emotional displays are also seen differently. Social emotion is often performative. The wounded loner senses when emotion is genuine and when it is conditioned. This discernment is quiet but accurate. It prevents entanglement. Morality itself becomes clearer. Social morality often reflects fear rather than truth. Awareness distinguishes imposed rules from inner integrity. The wounded loner lives ethically not to belong, but because presence demands honesty. Power structures become transparent. Authority based on fear loses influence. The wounded loner respects wisdom, not position. This discernment protects freedom. This is why wounded loners see through social illusions. They are not outside society, but no longer hypnotized by it. Presence has cleared their vision. And once illusion is seen clearly, it can no longer rule the inner world. Stillness gives them quiet power. Stillness gives rise to a power that does not announce itself. It is not forceful, persuasive, or loud. It does not seek recognition. This power emerges naturally when the inner noise of compulsive thinking subsides. In stillness, awareness is no longer scattered. It gathers itself. The wounded loner having learned to remain present without distraction, rests in this gathered awareness. From here, perception is clear and steady. Action arises without strain. Words are fewer, but they carry weight. This quiet power is unsettling to a world addicted to display and assertion. It cannot be challenged because it does not compete. It cannot be manipulated because it does not react. Stillness does not push against life, it aligns with it. This alignment creates strength without effort. Others may sense it without understanding it. It is the power of being fully here, unfragmented by fear or desire. When the mind becomes quiet, attention returns to its source. This return is stabilizing. The wounded loner no longer seeks energy from conflict, validation, or approval. Stillness supplies what was once sought outside. From this inner sufficiency arises confidence without arrogance. Decisions are made without inner argument. There is no rush to explain or justify. Silence surrounds action like a field of support. This does not mean passivity. Stillness is dynamic. It allows right action to emerge at the right time. Because the loner is not driven by mental noise, their actions are precise. They respond rather than react. This precision is often mistaken for detachment. In truth, it is intimacy with the moment. Stillness sharpens timing. It knows when to move and when to wait. This discernment is power. Quiet power also arises from the absence of inner resistance. The wounded loner has learned to allow experience without immediately labeling it as wrong. This allowance removes friction. Energy that was once consumed by resistance becomes available for clarity and presence. In this state, the loner is not easily shaken. Praise does not inflate them. Criticism does not collapse them. They remain rooted. This rooting is felt by others. It creates a sense of gravity. People may feel calm or uneasy in their presence, depending on their relationship with stillness. Quiet power reveals what noise hides. It does not impose, it exposes. Stillness also dissolves the need to dominate. Many forms of power in the world are compensations for inner insecurity. They rely on control, intimidation, or persuasion. Quiet power needs none of these. It does not seek to influence outcomes through pressure. It trusts alignment. The wounded loner understands that forcing outcomes creates imbalance. Stillness allows life to respond naturally. This trust creates resilience. Even when outcomes are uncertain, the loner remains steady. This steadiness influences situations without effort. Others adjust unconsciously. Conflict de-escalates. Tension softens. This is not strategy. It is presence at work. In stillness, listening deepens. The wounded loner hears not only words, but what lies beneath them. Tone, hesitation, and silence speak clearly. This deep listening gives quiet power its reach. People feel seen without being analyzed. This presence invites honesty. It disarms defensiveness. Because the loner is not trying to gain advantage, interactions become simple. Truth surfaces naturally. Stillness creates a space where clarity can arise without confrontation. Quiet power also comes from patience. Stillness is comfortable with unfolding. The wounded loner does not rush resolution. They allow situations to reveal themselves fully. This patience prevents unnecessary action. It protects energy. Many problems resolve themselves when not interfered with by fear. Stillness understands this. It waits without tension. This waiting is active awareness. not passivity, it is readiness without urgency. In the absence of mental noise, intuition becomes clearer. The wounded loner senses alignment and misalignment immediately. This sensing is not dramatic, it is subtle and reliable. Stillness amplifies this inner guidance. Decisions feel obvious rather than debated. This clarity appears effortless to others. It is the result of sustained presence. Quiet power moves with confidence because it is guided from within, not by external pressure. Stillness also anchors the body. The wounded loner inhabits their physical presence fully. This embodiment creates grounded authority. Movements are calm, gestures are minimal. The body communicates stability before words appear. This somatic presence is deeply influential. Others feel it instinctively. It creates trust or discomfort depending on their openness to presence. Quiet power is felt, not explained. Because stillness dissolves fear of loss, quiet power is fearless without aggression. The wounded loner is not attached to outcomes, identities, or roles. This detachment removes leverage. Threats lose force, promises lose seduction. The loner remains centered. This center is not rigid, it is flexible and responsive. Stillness allows adaptation without collapse. This adaptability is strength. Stillness also refines integrity. When the inner world is quiet, misalignment is felt immediately. The wounded loner cannot betray themselves without sensing the disturbance. This sensitivity creates unwavering honesty. Actions align naturally with values. There is no need for moral display. Integrity becomes embodied. This embodiment carries authority that cannot be argued with. Quiet power does not seek followers. It does not persuade, it stands. Those who resonate draw near. Those who resist move away. Stillness allows this sorting without effort. The wounded loner does not cling to connection. They allow it. This freedom strengthens presence. Relationships become cleaner. Boundaries form naturally. Over time, quiet power reshapes the loner's environment. Without imposing change, their presence invites it. Noise softens. Pace slows. Awareness spreads subtly. This influence is invisible but real. It leaves no trace of dominance. Only balance remains. Stillness also protects energy. The wounded loner no longer wastes attention on unnecessary conflict or explanation. Energy is conserved. This conservation deepens presence. Quiet power grows through simplicity. Less effort, more impact. In moments of crisis, quiet power becomes unmistakable. While others react, the loner remains present. This presence stabilizes situations. Clear action emerges. Others follow not because they are told to, but because clarity is contagious. Stillness leads without command. This is why stillness gives them quiet power. It is not power over others, but power rooted in being. It does not demand recognition. It does not fear challenge. It remains. And in a world driven by noise, this remaining becomes the most powerful force of all. What makes wounded loners unsettling is not what they do, but what they no longer need. They do not seek permission to be themselves. They do not beg for belonging or chase validation. Having already faced inner collapse, they are not terrified of losing appearances, roles, or identities. This gives them a calm resilience that cannot be faked or taught. When you meet someone who is comfortable standing alone, you are not meeting weakness. You are meeting someone who has integrated their pain into awareness. And that quiet integration becomes strength not to dominate others, but to remain unshaken in a world addicted to noise.